migrate, or what are the drivers behind your migration strategy. And then the bottom line, plan, test, plan, and go. I mean, it is all about planning. It's about the testing. It's validation. If you don't plan, you will fail. All right. So the methodology or the framework that we like to talk about at Zia is this. It's a methodology where you do discovery, you do extraction, transformations, you have business rules in place, you do the content migration, that's actually doing the migration, testing, validating, you have auditing, indexing, and of course the final verification. Now all these steps, simple migrations, you might not actually cover everything here, or you should, but you might not, it just depends on your value, how much value you guys need out of the migration methodology. The more complex your systems, the more it is key that you need to follow. You need these steps in your migration plan. Oops, sorry. The first step of every migration is the discovery process. The discovery process is where you go in, you find out what are the business drivers. What's their overall goal? What's the organization's goals? What are they trying to achieve overall? What are the key requirements? You need to know this, otherwise you're going to architect something too complex. Or you're going to architect something where you don't actually capture all the data that you need. And then you need to create a content inventory or a migration inventory. Really, it's just a checklist. So in that checklist, you want to understand how much volume you have in terms of data, and also the quality of that data. So the quality of the data is the quality of your data before the system, before your migration, so how it looks like in your source systems, and how it should actually look like in your new target system. So that there's a mapping that needs to happen there. The volume, you need to know how much you're going to be moving, right? If it's a couple thousand records, sure, that's easy. It's not too much planning on that piece. But once you start talking about millions of records, once you're talking about consolidating different systems to bring in the right content and metadata, it's key to know what you need to be migrating, what's actually out there, what the volume is. When it comes to documents, you need to know how your documents are being used in the system, what changes are happening with your documents or the content. How will the migration actually affect what's in play, right? If you're going to migrate, you're either going to stop everyone from working, or you're going to be putting a strategy in place so that you allow them to continue working until you have the cutover. The metadata and properties. So this one's big because the metadata and properties could be huge, right? So when you migrate, you only want to extract what you need or pull in what you actually need. Leave out everything else you don't need. And so you don't have to. You're not massively pulling in stuff that isn't relevant in the new system. You need to know your sources of content. So your legacy ECM systems, your file shares, your Dropboxes, your cloud systems, your CRMs, ERPs, whatever there is. So you need to understand what those sources are and which of those sources you're actually going to be pulling in, which of those sources you need to create your links out to, or create associations and whatnot. You need to understand your target location. So this would be your Alfresco. You need to know what solution you're building. You need to know where that's at, how the migration is going to affect that solution that you have or you're currently building or is in process. You need to know if your solution will actually be able to handle your migration, both in terms of what you put in it and what is happening to the system while things are being pushed in, while people are using the system, right? If you have a system that is pegged for, or you guys are at the top line, a 2 CPU Alfresco instance, and you got your maximum number of users in there, and you run migration, well, your migration's going to fail. All your users aren't going to be able to do any of their work, so you got to take those into consideration. And then you also need to know, you just need to know your load performance. So, do you need to throw more resources at it? Do you need to get more CPUs? Do you need more memory so that things aren't falling over in your migration? You need to know your document lifecycle. So how do you know how are the documents move through the system? When are they expired? What content actually is relevant for the migration? Then you also need to know users, groups, ACLs, permissions, all your standard stuff around who gets access, how people can see those documents in the content. Okay. So that was discovery. So after discovery, so the list that I just talked about is sort of a framework in terms of the checklist, but it's content focused. You need to know what you're going to be migrating. All right, so the next step is extraction. So the extraction step is where you actually pull content out of your source systems. You're pulling the right content, you're pulling the right details from these systems. You're not pulling everything out unless if you need everything. Okay? Some of the items that you might be pulling out are structures, taxonomies, hierarchies, metadata. You also have links, relationships, and associations between that's also being realized. Categories, lists, users, groups, permissions, ACLs, all that. So that stuff, that is your extraction phases. Extraction is one of the simpler steps, as long as the system allows for you to extract. If not, then you gotta get creative. After extraction is transformation. So this is the step where you actually turn the content that you extracted out into content that is good for your migration. Okay? You're going to be staging the content. You're going to be mapping content from your old to your new, from your old systems to your new system, to your new target. You're determining what's going to stay, what's not going to stay if you didn't do that during the earlier phases. And like I said, you're going from junk to an organized system. All right. Now, business rules. So this is where it's basically the first validation step of what you're trying to migrate. You need to know how was the content used in your old systems, how will it be used in the new systems. That's important. Make sure what's going into the new systems, you're making things more intuitive, more simple to use. If you're building a new system that's more complex, you're just doing an expensive migration that people won't use, right? So. Business rules are critical. You could build in Alfresco. You could build them in as policies or folder rules. You can build them in as part of the migration process. But business rules are key to a successful migration. All right. So the actual content migration. So this is where you set up your Alfresco. You get it ready. You put in the folder structures if that's what's needed. You get the metadata there. You get the users and groups all created or synchronized into the system. And then you do an initial load. Test the system. See how fast things are going in. See how fast the system can support what you can do. If you're limited by CPUs, you're gonna need to pull things down, not bring things in quickly. So there's lots of considerations there. If you're not bound by CPUs and you could just throw whatever resources you want at the system, then great, do that. But you need to know what the system requires and also how to support existing implementations and solutions. Okay. Next is auditing and indexing. So auditing and indexing, it'll happen at the very beginning when you're doing discovery. It'll also happen while you're putting content into the system. But really, this is important for those scenarios where you need an audit trail, where compliance is key. You need to know, you got to have exceptional error handling. So if there's any errors, you're able to take care of those errors. You gotta know how from this data, you'll be able to gather how much content is actually getting moved in, how quickly you can process systems out of your source systems into your new system. And then making sure that all your content can be found and indexed and leveraged appropriately. So the final step is your final verification. So this is just making sure everything ran smoothly, right? You got to review your audits. You do an audit, run your unit tests, run your migration tests, see if there's anything out of the ordinary. Validate the contents there. So that goes back to the business rules. Some of the business rules will drive what the validation looks like. Get users in front of it, make sure that what got migrated in is what was actually supposed to get migrated in. And then you need to plan and execute a decommissioning strategy for your old systems, right? If you're migrating, the main reason is you're trying to get off of those systems. So that is a part of the plan, right? So that is the methodology that we run through when it comes to migrations. Like I said, we use this for migrations that are as small as moving a couple thousand documents from a couple different systems into Alfresco, all the way up to pulling hundreds of millions of records from disparate systems where there's no API, so we got to go directly to, we got to see how content's going over the wire, and then just call against that, and then go directly to the database. So there's a lot of tricky things that you can do, but you just got to know what you're doing. Now, when it comes to migration strategies, you have 4 different types of strategies. You got the big bang migration. You have a incremental or phase migration. You also have sort of a lazy or in-place migration, and I'll cover all these in a minute. And of course, you have synchronization. And sync isn't really a migration strategy, but it is. Now, all these things are, again, it's how you determine what you choose. It's going to come out of the corporation, your organization's goals, and what needs to happen, right? What does your business continuity plan look like? How much downtime is acceptable, if any? So all those are key factors in determining how you do a migration. Sometimes it's a mixture of all these different strategies, right? So a big bang migration, also known as a rip and replace type of migration, but this is where whole systems are migrated. There you have a short downtime, maybe it's a weekend, it's a holiday where people aren't working, and everything needs to happen during that short downtime. So it's a lot of just making sure that your system resources are jacked up so that you can support the quickness. The plan is in place, everything has been completely tested, so you've already run through a full migration using a snapshot data. And so you pick a date, and then hopefully all goes well, right? So that's a big bang migration. In terms of designing this migration, it's less complex, really. And so the tools might not be as robust, or might not be as, the tools suite that you need might not be a very robust suite. One example is we used TSU's Open Migrate tool for a big bang migration where we migrated 25 million records out of a proprietary system over a weekend. So it was, it's one of those tools, and then there's some other tools I'll cover that are sort of like the Bentleys in the industry. Incremental migrations. This is what you'll probably see when it comes to migrating mission critical systems. But this is where you take an incremental or a phased approach. All right? You don't migrate everything all at once. You migrate things in chunks. You have things that are you got deltas going back and forth. You got 2 parallel systems running, so things are getting migrated in. People are spot checking it. People are still using the old system, but the new system is in play, and it's just getting caught up until the date where you actually make that cutover. So this is one where you bring stuff in much quicker. It does make the design more complex because you got to make sure you have the right tooling to support the incremental or the delta, the differential type of migrations to a new system. This does, so this is one where the business continuity plan might take place where, they say, we're a global company and you have a 2-hour window for a cutover. All right, so, you do as much as you can to get to that point where you have a 2-hour window to actually make a cutover. And then if you need lots of tracking, a lot of auditing, this is one of the reasons for an incremental type of migration. Okay. So a lazy or in-place migration, this is one that we like in terms of just sort of making things a bit easier in terms of migration. So, it's an event or trigger-based type of migration. It's not migrating people immediately. It's migrating content when it's accessed, when it's determined that it's actually useful. So you have your old systems, and there's organizations where they say, well, we have FileNet, we want to get off of it, but corporate says we're not going to get off of it, or if we do, it's it's a huge shift in the organization. So let's find a way to just move the important data off of that system into a new system. The way that a lazy or in-place migration works is you basically put an abstraction layer on top of all your different sources of content, and it's basically pipes. You're building a plumbing system into all the different systems, and then you have triggers that either move content over, keeps it in place, or creates virtual repositories. One tool that we like to use for that is Simflofy. They have the technology to support that, and they're starting to build some technology on top of that in terms of surfacing virtual views. Workdesk was a good tool also for that, where you can have multiple repositories coming into a single UI, keep the UI consistent. Another way to do it is ESB integrations or using an activity engine, out-of-process activity, so not within Alfresco or the repository, but an actual just engine core. Drupal, Crafter, portals, other ways to get to that content. So that's a lazy in place. It's based on a trigger. It's based on some rule that says move this content over only if it's important. So you don't it might be more expensive because you're going to be maintaining all your systems still, but in the long run, you say in 18 months from now, this system's going to go into long-term storage. So we're going to collect analytics, we're going to collect data at that point. All the content that's important to us is moved in. All the content that was never touched, it's going to go to tape drive storage or whatever. So that's a type of strategy with a lazy or in-place migration. Synchronization, it's just really mirroring, one-way sync, two-way sync. This is useful for integration and coexist strategies where they need, one good example is SharePoint. The organization standard is SharePoint. You're not going to get away from SharePoint. They want the content in SharePoint so that everything will work, all the tooling in SharePoint will work, but the records are being synced back to Alfresco either as, at a trigger event or just as content is updated. So Alfresco just sort of stays as the system that manages those records. So you can either sync or just expose directly from Alfresco. But sync is a strategy. Okay. So those are the 4 different strategies. Which do you choose? Because no migration is the same, it really depends on, again, your business drivers, what's your overall goals. How do you choose? What are the goals in the vision? What are your business drivers? What are your requirements? And what does the content tell you, right? If it's content that's in a legacy system, and it's determined it's just going to cost $1 million to get all that content out, and you don't got $1 million, well, there's other strategies, right? So it's not always getting all the content out. It's just making sure that you could get to that content in a single place and moving stuff over as needed. All right, so migration tools, as I alluded to, the tool sets that we've used, Simflofy and Migration Center. These two are sort of like the Bentleys in the industry. There's Open Migrate, which provides some of the tooling that Simflofy and Migration Center provides. However, there's more building to it, so it's not supported out of the box and all that. Then there's Alfresco. So Alfresco has some tooling in terms of getting content in, not necessarily the whole migration story, just a piece. So bulk loading, right? If you're moving 1 million documents into the system, you're not going to use APIs. You're going to use the bulk file system import tool to get it all in. And then Alfresco also has replication jobs. So think about infrastructure changes. You're on Alfresco, you deployed to Postgres, that was a rookie mistake. Your organization's standardized on Oracle, and you need to move to Oracle, right? Database migrations aren't supported by Alfresco, so another way to actually do this migration is from your old Alfresco instance, just replicate it over. Use the replication system in the transfer service that Alfresco provides out of the box. Boom, you're done. You can run your methodology on the stuff on the old system, move all the relevant stuff to the new system. Okay. Or you could build your own, and we've built our own because it just makes sense to build our own. You might use CMIS. You'll run against different APIs Alfresco provides, or the bulk file system import tool. But usually, when you're building your own, it's a smaller migration that you're trying to handle, not some of these bigger ones and more complex ones. All right. So the message I'm trying to say is just pick the right tool for your job. All right? Now, the migration tools, the Bentleys of the industry, like I also alluded to, Simflofy and Migration Center, they're built for high volume migrations. They're supported systems, and they're fully tested and validated for these type of high volume, complex type of migration scenarios. You can set up jobs, you can batch process things into the system. You can get a whole suite of discovery and profiling data. You can get audit trails, logs, some information about our analytics in terms of what's getting migrated in. I said support, and Simflofy is unique in that it provides a virtual repositories view. It allows for lazy in-place migration, so you can build applications on top of Simflofy that just sort of talk to Simflofy, and it's all about the content. Simflofy just takes care of it takes care of the plumbing to all your different disparate systems. Right? Yeah.
How easy it is to customize these tools? For example, when we look at Simflofy, we have our own set of metadata that needs to come over from the legacy systems, right? So different legacy systems, when you're looking to consolidate, will have different set of folder attributes that you want to bring over, right? So what the Simflofy offers you instead of building your own kind of scripts to handle the larger migrations?
Sure. So Simflofy, it's like the migration center. It's like Open Migrate. It's built on a source target type of infrastructure. In terms of support, we could talk about this offline, or I'll answer it towards the end, just make sure we have enough time so I get through slides. But there's a robust set of APIs that they provide, and so they abstract what content. You can extract where that content exists, and you just ask it for certain sets of, you build a virtual repository. From that virtual repository, then you can just sort of use that virtual repository as a content store or a content system that would exist and you're pulling information out of. So, yeah. Again, we could talk towards the end.
Any tools to pull data out of Outlook and Exchange?
You can build connectors. I will address some of that. We're looking at some of that stuff now. Okay. So what was I? Yes. Okay. So these are the Bentleys of the system, right? Migration tools, open source. You have the open source options. You got Open Migrate, great tool. Like I said, we've done a migration, moving 25 million records out of a legacy system, or you build your own. And when you want to consider an open source option, one of these options is you have a simple extract, transform, load type of scenario. You don't need the support. You don't need auditing. You don't need the high level loggings and analytics that, unless you're going to build it yourself, that normally come with these other systems. However, you do need to have deep knowledge of your source systems and your target systems, because you're going to be building your source target connectors. Whereas the Bentleys or these guys, they're going to build you your connectors. They're going to support those connectors for you. Yes.
TSG side.
Yeah.
We do provide auditing.
Okay.
I want to make sure I appreciate the shutout and the Bentley
Sure.
versus
Yep.
the free one from an open source side. I know you guys have used it. We do provide support. We do provide auditing.
Okay. So I stand corrected.
So I just want to make sure that it's not the end.
Yep.
A separate class.
Oh,
it's open
sure.
source. Right.
Got it. Yep. Okay. So just repeat what I said. The Open Migrate tooling is TSG provides support for the system. They have auditing. They have the logging systems in place. So I stand corrected. So thank you. All right. So migration tools, when it comes to Alfresco, they have the bulk file system import tool. Like I said, this is just get all your content into the system quickly. You're moving lots of content, big files into the system. You want to use the bulk file system import tool, no questions. If you're doing Alfresco to Alfresco type of migrations, replication jobs are excellent ways to do that. And then Alfresco, of course, provides a robust set of APIs that allows you to just do smaller migrations into the system. So migration patterns here. Some of the migration patterns that you'll encounter are these. You got content discovery, and all of these sort of come out of the methodology. You have content discovery, and so discovery is where you're throwing crawlers into your source systems to find out what type of content there is, how much volume you have, the metadata that's in those systems, the classes, the taxonomy. So you can you can have a discovery system that goes and crawls these systems, gives you reports. You have content transformation. So this is just taking your old content, mapping it to your new system. So it's a mapping of your content. Processing is exception handling, making sure that you have ways to you have retry logic in place. You can you know when things fail and it doesn't blow up on you. You can go back and fix things. There's content logging, and that's just all the reports, the audit trails, all the logs that would come within a logging system. Now cleanse, so content cleansing. This you can do during the extraction, you can do it during the transformations, or you could do it pre-extraction. So this is where you go clean up the data, the content, make sure that the content's valid. Right? If let's say you're migrating from a database, and the database was something that just sort of morphed into what is currently used today over 20 years. What they originally planned it for 20 years ago, the content that's being used today, completely different. You gotta go clean that up. So that's cleanse, but also content on the ECM side, you can clean up your metadata, you can clean up your content there. For migration testing, this is where you unit test. You test your migrations. You validate that what you're migrating actually works. Your process works. Your methodology that you've picked is actually going to execute successfully. Then you also have volume and load testing. This is where you go and test a real migration scenario. You take a snapshot of your current systems, go into a testing environment and move everything and make sure that everything migrates over successfully, right? If you're gonna go over a weekend and you're gonna migrate a couple 100 million records over, you better be sure that it's gonna be successful in terms of that migration. So you gotta make sure, so you do a full volume migration. That will also tell you if the systems that you have in place will actually meet the performance needs that are needed for both pulling stuff out, pushing stuff in, right? And then you have your incremental, and this is just the phased migration approach. So these are different migration patterns. It's everything talked about earlier. It comes out of methodology. It comes out of which strategy you pick in terms of the migration. All right, so best practices here. So what not to do. Make sure you understand your business scenario that is the cause for the migration. Don't pick the wrong business scenario. Listen to why you need to migrate. Don't pick the wrong business drivers. You pick the wrong business drivers, you're just going to migrate something that shouldn't have been migrated. Or you'll design too complex of a system, or you won't design something that will migrate everything that you need. Having a lack of overall vision, right? So they just say, we just want to get off of this system. We just want to get to Alfresco. It's the newest, hottest thing. We're on legacy, but there's no real vision. All right? You're setting yourself up for failure there. Disregard adoption and user experience. So maybe less than the user experience, but definitely adoption. If you push stuff to a new system and you're designing it where it's not going to be adopted by your user base, by the people using the system, well, you just paid a buttload to migrate stuff into a new system. You're paying a buttload for a new system, and you're just going to be doing another migration pretty soon to get stuff out of that system. Okay? So, gotta design a migration into a system that will be adopted by your user base. Over customization and slow delivery, or not being realistic in terms of what you can actually migrate out of a system. And then ignoring content quality. Right? What content exists in one system might actually be relevant, good data. In a new system, it could be bad data if you don't do any type of cleanup transformations to that content, right? It's going to be used differently in that new system. If it's a one-to-one map, great. But a lot of times, it's not a one-to-one map. So definitely don't want to get here, right? So what you should do, make sure, like I said, just going back, understand your goals and overall vision, focus, and justifying the return on investment for the migration. Right? That will help you determine what needs to happen there. Understand your infrastructure, the system, the tools that you're selecting, or the tools that you think you'll be needing. Understand the content. Make sure the old and the new, you know the relationships between the systems. Follow a framework. Build that methodology. And follow it. Plan, test, plan, go. That's what we say at ZIA. So, it's all about planning. If you don't plan, and stick to a plan, you're gonna set yourself up for failure. Then, if this is your first migration, or you haven't done a very complex migration, don't go at it alone. Get help. There's a rich partner community, lots of knowledge. So get help in terms of just trying to making sure that you guys are designing a successful migration. Right? So that's it, Q&A. We have a white paper on Active Migrate that we've posted, so it's on, if you go there, you can get it. We're going to be blogging on contentpeople.com. My contact information's there, and the mark's there. So, yeah, questions? Yeah, I think I have a couple minutes. Yeah.
The extraction, I'm back to the same question. When you look at metadata from different legacy systems, right? What's the correct approach to put that metadata into Alfresco's data model? Is the aspect the way to go, or is any system consideration you should be aware of in terms of the volume of data you're migrating, let's say, terabytes of data with millions of tags being brought over into the system? Is that something that needs to be configured differently in the environment to support that kind of migration?
It's going to be based on the solution you're building. I mean, if you're doing a migration and you're just doing from one system to another, right? If the use case fits, great. But a lot of times, the new system is used differently. You're trying to solve different use cases, and so really, it's going to be based on the solution that you're building, right? And then what the capabilities of Alfresco. If you're pulling from a database and you're going database to Alfresco, Alfresco, the content modeling is not exactly highly relational. You're not going to be doing you're not going to be doing the same stuff that you would have been doing in a database inside of Alfresco's content model. So you need to take that into consideration. If you do need to keep it relational, maybe you do kick it out to a database or use an attribute service. The attribute service has a triple quad store that you can use to sort of model out information. But like I said, it really depends on what you're building, right? And the success of what the end result is. Yeah.
Any advice on how you would migrate groups or ACLs from, say, a documentum system into Alfresco? Is there tools out there that can help you with creating groups and populating the
Sure.
groups? And the ACLs, translating the documentum ACLs to how Alfresco applies, its permissions.
Right.
We have to write our own.
Well, so getting users and groups, hopefully that was being managed by a directory service like Active Directory. So if it was managed there, you can sync all your users and groups directly into Alfresco, pull that stuff in. Now, if you have custom ACLs, custom permission sets, we need to make sure when we map it over, Alfresco is the folder hierarchy model. I forgot what documentum was. It's been 6 years since I last touched it. But if it's not directly mapped, then we just need to either build a new permissions model inside Alfresco that matches what you do, or just break inheritance and then put the permissions or ACLs at the node. But again, it depends on how you want it in your new system, right?
But if you have a lot of different folders with different permissions and stuff, are there any tools that help you?
Sure. Yeah. So any of these tools, you can use it to push users and group permissions into the system. You just you make the mappings from what it is in your source, so documentum, to what it needs to be in Alfresco, and then you just create those mappings and get those all push them into the system. Now, I'm jumpy right now just because I haven't done that level, but I know that there's guys that have done it.
We've done the
Yeah.
documented migration with the ACL list with heavily complex ACLs that we've done a combination of move things over as well as define the object model and security so that the document itself determines what its security is. If that's, for the one client, it was they wanted to clean it up because they had 80,000 ACLs floating around out there. So, trying to get that into a more manageable framework was part of their migration.
So actually, we are working with TSG, and they haven't really told us a good way of doing that or add anything in the tool that actually would help with that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the tooling might be custom code that you have to write. Right. It's the cleanup jobs, the jobs after the post or pre-processing jobs that need to occur as content either moves in. So it's not a direct. Oh, you just get a connector and boom, it'll solve all your migration needs. Right. A lot of times there's a connector to move stuff in, and there's the jobs, the post, the pre-processing that needs to occur on the data that's getting migrated.
But obviously, the problem there is writing code to do it.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. What not in a highly distributed environment where some of the content you need to migrate actually resides on individuals' hard drive?
Yes. So that's a different problem, right? If it's on different people's hard drives, you need to build a policy. You know, if the IT department has access to the hard drives, and you go crawl, pull, lock down people's systems. So that one's more of a policy, right? It's an organizational policy that you guys need to implement before you can actually migrate. Unless if you have hooks into those people's systems and say, well, we're going to lock you down for a little bit and just pull your content off your hard drives, right?
Capacity planning, actually, if I have 20 terabytes of content to be migrated, will it be the equal amount of storage I need to plan in Alfresco, or will it require more storage because it also stores the preview versions of the document?
So you will need to, capacity plan in terms of content size, the actual content stream, the document. Whatever exists on that old system, you're going to have that same amount on Alfresco. So if you have versions of different documents, you need to have, you need to take that into account. So that's your content store. Your database, that's how much metadata you're pulling over. That's a different calculation. And then indexes. Indexes are another different calculation. So index and content store are easy calculations because you know what it is. Alfresco, in terms of document versions, actual different separate versions, they're binary, so they're treated as a new file. So it's not like a diff of a text file, and they store the diff, right?
How about previews actually? Each document will have its preview version.
So previews. So in Alfresco, a preview file is an actual file. It's an image file, right? Your source systems, whatever it is, if it's a file, then we're gonna move that file over. If it's if we just need to regenerate the preview on Alfresco, then we won't move that over. But yeah, so files go to the file system. Period. Content goes to the database. Period. Indexes go to Solar. Cool. So I know I'm up on time. More than happy to discuss more right after this, but I know the guys were trying to get me off the mic. So thank you all. I hope this was useful.